Welcome to Madi, Kooba from the UNLV Writing Center for our Grad Rebel Writing Bootcamp workshop on overcoming writer's block and perfectionist tendencies. So over to you, Madi. Thank you.
Perfect. Yes, hello, my name is Madi. I'm the assistant coordinator at the UNLV Writing Center. I just graduated last spring from UNLV with my master's, and then I'm starting a different PhD program in the fall. So I am very much familiar with what everybody is dealing with in terms of all of the writing that comes with being a grad student. So today, that's why I'm kind of being the one helping to lead this Overcoming Writer's Block and Perfectionistic Tendencies workshop to hopefully give you some strategies and practice applying those strategies to work through these things that are very common and can be a big deal for all of us. So let me see if I can get this. There we go. Okay, so as you can see in the workshop, we're going to discuss the reasons for writer's block. We're also going to talk about imposter syndrome and define it because that's a huge part of it. We're going to talk about the relationship between writer's block and perfectionism and identify some strategies for making time to write and maintaining focus as you write, as well as just talking about some ways that you can actually write through writer's block and overcome perfectionism. So we'll be doing a few hands-on writing activities to help you hopefully apply a variety of these different strategies that you can keep in your toolbox for future use. So for that reason, if you have a pen, a notebook, or just a laptop or something that you can write with handy, that would be helpful. I think most of you have laptops, so something like that. Okay, so this might look familiar because this happens to a lot of people when we're writing, because writing is really difficult and a really complex task. So it can be a lot more than just fingers on a keyboard or pen on paper. And it can include things like translating thoughts in your head to words on a page, or identifying your audience's needs and determining how best to communicate that. Reflecting your interests, your experiences, conversations, classroom training, and reading about any topics you've done. It can be creating questions and conducting research to answer all of them. It can be talking to others to work through your ideas, taking breaks to let you step away and come back with fresh eyes, making outlines, notes, drafts, revising, editing, proofreading, polishing. Feels like the list kind of never ends. And it's really hard. And a lot of people just generally don't talk about that enough. So part of the goal of this workshop and everything we're going to talk about today is to just normalize how common it is to have all of these kind of overwhelming feelings about writing, and the fact that there's nothing wrong with you if you experience writer's block, because everybody experiences it and it's totally normal. So hopefully once we kind of begin to accept that, it can become easier for us to fight off any sort of guilt or negative feelings related to it and associated with it, and also help us prepare to work through it when we do inevitably encounter it. So before we dive into too much more, we'll actually talk about what writer's block is and what causes it. So writing anxiety and writer's block are two terms for a lot of generally negative feelings that we might have about writing. These feelings might not exist all of the time, or they might only exist when you sit down to write, or they might not exist every single time you sit down to write. But basically, the fact that it's not, permanent and always there means that it's situational. And it's also important to note that these terms don't describe psychological attributes. People are not born anxious writers. It's more that they become anxious or blocked through negative or difficult experiences with writing. So maybe sometimes we enter the writing space with previous experiences that set up negative expectations for our abilities and feelings towards writing. This could include a professor or previous instructor telling you that you are horrible with thesis statements, or maybe you grew up telling yourself from elementary school that you're not a good writer, quote unquote, so you don't expect to do well. Um, all of these kinds of things and baggage that we might be bringing in with us can be informing writer's block or writer's anxiety in ways that we don't realize. So if we're able to take the time to check in with ourselves and look at where we're at and where these thoughts come from, we can get a sense of how we can really combat any negative associations, especially when they prevent us from being successful. So another thing that we can talk about, because it kind of is directly related to writer's block and writer's anxiety, is imposter syndrome. So the infamous imposter syndrome, which we've probably heard of a lot, or we might be familiar with the feelings even if we don't know the term. But basically, it's this feeling that you don't deserve to be where you are, and you'll somehow be exposed as an imposter. This can include feelings of self-doubt, insecurity, or fraudulence, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. And it can be really common for graduate students, especially in graduate school. Many graduate students generally might feel like they don't belong, or they don't know what they're doing, or they feel like they don't have the qualifications needed to do the work, which can really stall your ability to push forward. But the important thing to recognize and remember is that imposter syndrome often strikes smart, successful students and individuals. And it can be even more likely to happen to someone who's more knowledgeable or an expert in the field, because with that knowledge comes the realization that there's so much more that you don't know yet. So it can appear pretty regularly after a notable accomplishment. For example, admission to a graduate program or general admission to a prestigious university. If you get any sort of public acclaim for your work, maybe you win an award, maybe even at a job if you earn a promotion, or even just, generally the fact that you got into grad school. And so one of the main reasons that we as grad students might suffer from imposter syndrome is because we're just starting out in our fields. And so we're constantly surrounded by and working with these higher level professionals who've worked in the field for decades and know so much more than us and have so much more experience and so much more knowledge. So it kind of makes sense that we might feel like we're at the beginning or we don't know that much in comparison. Imposter syndrome might feel kind of like a manifestation of all of your insecurities. And so it's important to just remember that it's okay to acknowledge like when you don't know how to do something or that you're struggling to do something, even if it's like something that feels like it should be simple, like a thesis statement. Because the fact of the matter is, we're still students, and even when we're not students anymore, we're still learning and we do know things and we are capable. We're here for a reason. Our professors and everybody knows it, and we know it too. So, despite all of that, you might be thinking, I just want to make sure my work is good and up to par with the people in my field. So, what's the issue with that? What does that have to do with writer's block and perfectionism? I will give you this quote that hopefully helps answer it. Perfectionism, this is by Anne Lamott, perfectionism will keep you cramped and insane your whole life, and it is the main obstacle between you and a shitty first draft. So you may or may not have heard the term shitty first draft or have read that book or that article called Shitty First Drafts. But basically, a big thing that this quote is kind of helping us to get at is that we need to embrace the power of the shitty first draft. We want everything, probably we write to be fantastic. And as grad students, we might feel that we're held to a higher standard than other people to have really good writing or know exactly what we want to do with our research or just generally be perfect. But again, something that we have to remember is that we're still learning and we will still be learning for a long time. So the important thing is to use our time wisely to make our work as good as we can, but also understand that our abilities aren't yet at their peak, and that's okay. Ultimately, you won't be able to grow if you don't know, if you don't like allow yourself to write down that shitty first draft. And in the story that is always kind of associated with this, we might talk about like our own toxic relationships with notebooks and how we just kind of scramble and write things and it seems awful and it feels awful and we don't want to look at it. But ultimately, if we don't write anything down, we can't get anywhere. So, though you might feel like you're a fraud or you don't belong or that you just got lucky to be here, or maybe you downplay your own achievements, you have to learn to push past these feelings and remember that this is your research and your writing. So, even though it might not be perfect and it might not be a masterpiece, it's still yours. And eventually, you will know more than your advisor. So, just think about that for a little bit. So let's now take a little bit of time to think about some ways that writer's block might manifest, or that you might accidentally kind of induce writer's block through yourself through perfectionism, which is hiding in the form of procrastination. The first thing is time of day. You might think, I'm a morning writer and it's noon already, so I can't do any writing because it's past morning, it's too late. Or you might base it on location, like I can only write in my living room when it's quiet, and now my roommate is watching TV in there and it's too loud, therefore I can't write in there, and so I just won't write today. These are the types of things that I certainly do, and a lot of people certainly do. But if you're waiting for the perfect time of day or the perfect location, or even just to be in a certain mood or to find certain sources, you know, the perfect setting, you're always going to just keep pushing the work off. But obviously, of course, procrastination or this feeling that we need to be perfect isn't the only thing sourcing writer's block, and there are a couple of other common factors that can do it. So I'll kind of go through those really quickly right now. The first thing that we kind of mentioned again in the beginning might be our own inner critic or self perception about our abilities. That might be separate from, or it might come from past criticism that we've received or judgments that we might have gotten from teachers or other people in our life. We might also have a fear of failure or a fear of rejection or even a fear of success. Nobody obviously likes to feel like a failure or that they're not good at something. But there can also be something scary related to success in terms of, well, what do I do once I hit this point? Or what does that mean for me? How does my life change if I get here? Or just generally, maybe you have really high expectations of yourself. And there's some sort of pressure that you feel to succeed or achieve a certain standard, and you don't know what to do if you get there or if you don't get there. Another thing is that you might feel burnt out or distracted, which is all too common considering the amount that we have on our plate as grad students. There are even just tons of distractions in the world beyond all of the things that are required from us in graduate school. And so neglecting a lot of these basic needs might be contributing. So, for example, we might have low energy due to our diet or our hydration or our exercise or sleep or lack of any of those things. And so no matter how much we might try to feel like, but I'm in the zone or I'm in the mood or I'm in a certain time of day or place, I have to keep going. If we have these external factors or other things impacting us, we're just going to make it worse. And we're going to keep kind of repeating this cycle where we're not able to do what we want or have the standard that we need to have and want to have. It might also just be the fact that we're writing in new forms that could cause writer's block, or writing in different or unfamiliar subject matter. It's obviously really difficult to write in general, but especially if you're trying to adapt to expectations or forms or content that you're unfamiliar with, that alone can be enough to make us kind of hesitate when we're writing or feel like maybe we're not living up to what we need to do. On another level, maybe we either have too much to say or just not enough to say. If we have too much to say, it can feel like it's impossible to cut it down, or it's impossible to figure out where to go and where to take our writing. Or obviously, if we feel like we don't have enough to say, we can put a lot of pressure on ourselves to come up with something to write, or to try to say and do anything. And that can obviously cause some sort of anxiety or a block. Similarly, we might have too much to do or just not enough to do in our lives outside of our writing. And so all of that external pressure, all of these other things we're thinking about can get in the way of us thinking about our writing. Or if we don't feel like we have enough to do outside and our writing is the only thing we think about, we might end up kind of spiraling or getting way too in our heads about it. And we're not able to think very clearly or kind of see it from that broader perspective. And so some of the last things that I'm sure are very prominent for all of us are approaching deadlines. Even just the thought of a looming deadline can make us feel really worried. We can stop in our tracks, and we can focus more on the pressure of needing to get something in by the time than just writing and producing something that we're happy with and that works. So ultimately, if we can identify the cause of our writer's block, we can regain control of the situation so we can get that back on track. An important thing to remember, a motto, if you will, is that a writer's block doesn't control us. We can control the writer's block. So to get us started on that, we're going to do this first activity, which is where I would like everybody just to do a little bit of reflecting and writing, where I will encourage you to describe your writer's block using the questions that are up here on the slide. I'm assuming that you now or at some point have been stuck, have had writer's block, have felt some sort of writing anxiety. So let's take a minute or so to think about, why do we get stuck, or what causes us to feel stuck? What are some of the feelings or situations you have when you get stuck? And at what point in your writing or at what time do you tend to feel stuck? So I'll give you about 2 to 3 minutes to write these things down and really just think about them. So you can obviously just type it up in notes on your computer, or if you have pen and paper in front of you, you can do that. But really, this is just a way for us to kind of get our writing brain ready for another writing task that we're going to do in a little bit. And obviously, of course, get us to a space where we can start to identify what causes our writer's block so that we can take steps to kind of work against it, control it instead of let it control us. So again, I'll give you 2 to 3 minutes. I'll check in at around 2:17, and then we'll go from there. I'll give you about another 30 seconds or so, but again, just generally writing to and thinking about these questions to help identify for yourself where your own individual writer's block comes from. Okay, so I'll have you wrap up if you haven't already, because I'll show you a quick quote and then I'll have us jump into another activity. So anyways, I do suggest holding on to the writing that you do today in some way, because it might be helpful if you find yourself getting stuck in the future, or you might be able to draw connections back to these things that you're writing about or these prompts that you're writing to later in the workshop. But in the meantime, I will share this quote with you from a researcher and writer named Helen Sword, who named 1,323 academic staff, PhD students, and postdoc researchers in 15 countries to learn how they write. And ultimately, what she found is this quote on the screen. Writing is neither a daily routine nor a rare occurrence, neither an immovable constant nor a random event. The secret to academic success lies in a complex cluster of attributes and attitudes that she calls their writing base. Behavioral habits of discipline and persistence, artisanal habits of craftsmanship and pride, social habits of collegiality and collaboration, and emotional habits of positivity and resilience. So we won't get too much into this concept of base that she describes today, but it is a useful resource to start thinking about as you begin to learn more about yourself as a writer. The main purpose, the main point really of this quote is to get you to think about success, whether that be overcoming writer's block and perfectionism or completing a fully formed draft, acknowledging the writing process as a series of habits, or anything else kind of related. Behavioral habits in particular are a really good place to start because those are the traits that we have the most control over and that are easiest to recognize. So if you want to know more about building writing habits or are just generally interested in this concept of base, there's a useful link on the Tools for Overcoming Writer's Block handout that I will have shared with you all. After this, and there's a link to a short quiz that you can take even that can help you determine your base habits. So that handout will also, will generally cover a lot of the things that we talk about today, and we'll also have different resources that I might mention throughout the rest of this presentation. So with that being said, I will have us go on to another activity or second writing task, which is where you'll just take a moment with each of the following questions to reflect on your writing habits. So I'll give you about 4 minutes total for this. Again, if you have a pen and paper and you want to write it down, or if you just want to type out your thoughts on your computer, again, only giving 4 minutes. You might want to write more to these questions in detail later. But I will give you about 2 minutes for these questions, and then there's a few more questions on the next slide that ultimately I would like you to write to. So again, you don't have to worry about grammar or spelling. If your thoughts make sense, the goal right now is just to write and get answers to these questions down. And again, it might be helpful to write something down just so that you can reference back to it later in the session. So I will give you about 2 minutes for this first set of questions, and then again, 2 minutes for the next set of questions on the next slide. But I'll check in about 2:23 for these first set of questions. So take about 30 more seconds for these questions, and then we'll give you another 2 minutes for the next set of questions. Okay. So we'll take another 2 minutes just about to have you write kind of whatever you want or need to these questions, and then we will move on. Okay, so most of the rest of this workshop is going to cover strategies that can help you kind of set this perfectionism that we've talked about aside and move your writing forward. You can think of these as tools you can put into a sort of toolbox for next time you get stuck, or just to help you prepare to avoid getting stuck in the future. So you might use some of them a lot, others you might rarely use, but just generally it's good to have them on and be aware of them in case you feel stuck, need a little push. So yes, the first of these strategies is to take notes. Writing does not only begin when you title your file or your document or whatever you're writing in thesis or dissertation or article. Writing can take many forms. Getting anything on paper is already useful, so taking notes is a valid form of writing. Even if you just start with taking notes on what you read, what you think, what you know, what your hypotheses are, what your plans are. This can be really helpful to do just when you're getting started or when you've stopped and maybe need a moment to reorient yourself. So also you can think in terms of drafts. You are going to revise no matter what. So why not have something to revise? It can be helpful to think about writing as a process because it is process, even though we might not be taught that a lot. And so a piece of writing isn't necessarily one and done. And in fact, it rarely ever is, if ever, honestly. So just get that shitty first draft started, to quote Anne Lamott again. You might find that that means you don't even start at the beginning and that you might write in pieces. So ultimately, if you are feeling stuck or maybe you're feeling pressured to start an introduction and write all the way through, that can be a lot of pressure. So just start with something you know, and then over time you can kind of go back and flesh it all out. So if you go in with the mindset knowing that it's not going to be perfect on the first try, and you just give yourself that permission to just write something, no matter how crappy you think it is, um, that just kind of gets you going and gets you something to work with. And it also kind of helps if you think about it not being the final form, but just getting something to get you on the way to that final form. So reminding yourself of that can be really helpful to combat these perfectionistic tendencies, and the kind of feeling of being overwhelmed that might come with creating something that doesn't look immediately how you want it to on the first try. Similar to that, breaking large tasks into smaller ones can be pretty effective. So it might be too daunting or overwhelming, or you might be putting way too much pressure on yourself if you think about, like, if you sit down and think, okay, I'm sitting down to write a literature review. Instead, you can think about, okay, I'm going to sit down and take notes on what's significant in one source, or I'm going to take notes on what's significant in one issue that I'm writing about. So maybe you could say, today I'm going to look at one or two of my sources, or today I'm just going to go over my research question and make sure it's sound. If you say, okay, I'm going to sit down and work on my dissertation, or I'm going to sit down and write my dissertation, that can make it seem like a huge, really overwhelming task. So breaking that down into manageable parts that have really specific goals and really specific things that you know you can accomplish can make it a lot more manageable and can decrease a lot of the stress that might come with it. So furthermore, breaking down your project into these lists or even smaller tasks within tasks can make it really easy, especially if you can have something like a to-do list where you can check things off and get that visual of being able to make accomplishment and take steps forward. That can help you feel like you're actually making progress. It can keep you invested in the process. And it can also, again, kind of eliminate this sense of you're working with this huge daunting task and feel like you're not able to get anything done, or writing you produce you're unhappy with can make you feel like you're taking a step back. So also trying to make sense of or remember what you need to do or what you should be doing in terms of creating a sort of to-do list can help you kind of compartmentalize and prioritize the things that you need to take on first. Your list can be as formal or informal as you like, but just identifying the steps that you need to take and giving yourself, again, that visual of completing those steps can be the first step towards helping you get a better sense of what you need to do and giving you something a lot more manageable. It can also just help you figure out how to move ideas around. So even, if it feels like it's not as useful to you in terms of perfectionism, it can just give you a visual of your writing in a different way and help you kind of move and navigate it and think of it more fluidly. You could even make a to-do list of things unrelated to your writing, like, okay, I have to do grocery shopping this week, or I need to take out the trash or email this professor, etc. and get those things done, or just have a visual of those things, because like we talked about earlier, these external factors or all these other things going on in your life can impact your writing and cause writer's block. So if you are able to write down all of these obligations and kind of put that list aside or check things off that list, that can help kind of clear your mind and allow you to focus solely on your writing, so that you're not bogged down by these other distractions or fears that you're going to forget to do things that you need to do. Also, just kind of a general thing that we've talked a little bit about across all of these, but just starting with what you know, where you have ideas. Again, there's no rule that says you need to start with the title, or you need to have the title before you write anything, or you need to write the introduction, then the body paragraphs, then the conclusion. Just pick the task that seems easiest to get you going, or what you know most about, and start from there. So another strategy you can try, particularly if you're a more competitive person, is something like speed writing. So it's basically giving yourself a really short amount of time, like 5 minutes until class starts, or 2 minutes. Basically just any really short period of time, or in any situation where you feel like you might need an energy boost, you just set a short time limit and you don't stop writing or typing if you're on a computer of some sort. So you might even try to set a word length goal, which is like, I'm going to write 500 words in 5 minutes. This is basically just to help you get something down, to help you turn off that internal editor that you might have when you're writing, where you can get distracted with, oh, I made a grammar mistake, or oh, this sentence isn't perfect. Because you likely won't have complete sentences. It might not make sense. You might jump from one idea to the other in order to write, as much as you can, or to your word limit in this specific time. And it might not be good at all, but it gives you something to work with, and it gets your ideas down, and it gets you out of your head, and it just gives you something tangible, which is something that we might struggle a lot with, especially if we're kind of confronting a blank page. So you can repeat this activity multiple times, try to pull out what's good, or if there are any particular ideas or phrases or sentences from each thing that you really liked, and then set a timer to write further to that specific part. So there's an interesting website that, again, will be on that handout that I will make sure is shared with you all. And it's called the Most Dangerous Writing App, which is really cool because basically you just set a timer for X amount of minutes, write everything you have, write everything you can. You don't stop writing. If you do stop for too long, then it will erase everything you have written. So it really just encourages you to keep writing and do as much as you can, so that you can get down as much as possible within that time limit. Basically just stream of consciousness. And it can be a cool way, a different way of thinking about your writing and getting ideas down that might help you generate more things and more thoughts than you were aware of. So free writing or mind dumping is kind of similar. You just set a particular issue or question and just write about it. You don't stop writing. You write stream of consciousness, write as fast as you think. With this, you're also not supposed to worry about writing complete sentences. You do your best not to edit as you go. The result obviously might not be as clean or as good as any sort of, draft that you're working with, but at the same time, it's just getting you ideas down that, like with speed writing, you can kind of pull what's good or what you like, or free write to something that you did in a previous free write that you want to expand upon. Just a way to get everything out of your head, because sometimes all the thoughts swirling in our head are related to something else that's stressing us out or frustrating it. So we can use free writing again to get out of our head, get something tangible down to make us feel like we're able to make progress and have ideas, and work on it. Even if it's something emotional that you're struggling with, or that you feel like is maybe preventing you from being able to put your full attention on your writing, you can use free writing to, again, kind of journal, get it out of your head, put some tangible thoughts to what you're feeling, because that can help you work through it and clear up that space you need to write more or take steps forward in relation to your writing project. So if you get distracted by editing as you write, as I most certainly do, you can turn off these editing tools. It can be really easy to let yourself get kind of caught up in all these different color squiggly lines, or if, whatever program or software you're working in will automatically make suggestions or change things for you to try and help. Even though, again, these are meant to be helpful, they can be really distracting for us. And especially when we're in the process of generating and just trying to get ideas down, that can be really hindering. So going into your settings or doing whatever to turn that off can give yourself the space to just write without feeling like you need to constantly edit or make sure everything is perfect before you move on to the next part of your writing. You can also try explaining it to someone else. You're writing your topic, your research, whatever you're struggling to get down on the paper with. So maybe you're having difficulty making an idea come across clearly, or you just have a bunch of ideas and are trying to see how they connect. But it seems to not be happening for whatever reason in your writing. One way you can do that is to just try to talk through it, even if it's to yourself. But obviously through somebody else, it can be helpful to talk through it and explain and get another perspective about what's clear or what they don't understand or where they see ideas, what's coming through to them that you might not be able to recognize because again, you might be so kind of caught up in your own head. There's also the sense that this is more related to teaching than anything, but like you don't really know a subject unless you're able to teach it to somebody else. So this can also be a helpful way of kind of grasping how much you know or where the gaps in your own knowledge are that might be inhibiting you that you don't even realize. So this can help you figure out what else do I need to write to, where else do I need to do research. Again, all of these things that just help you get another set of eyes on it. And again, kind of help you get it out of your head, turn it into something tangible that somebody can give you feedback on. So we're going to do a few more writing activities now that will give you practice using these strategies and seeing how it feels to actually do some of these things. This first one is going to be a little bit of a warm up, and I'll have you take notes about what you're currently working on or what you plan to work on next. And so the key thing that I'll have you do here is to be specific and not just say that you're going to write your thesis, but try to think about it in terms of these smaller tasks or break it down into these smaller tasks that we talked a little bit about earlier. So maybe it's something like synthesize the sources on topic B for my literature review, or start formulating my research question, or any notes that might be involved with achieving that task. So again, I'll have you kind of free write, just do it really quickly. We'll take like 1 to 2 minutes, but just get down as many thoughts as you can and be as specific as you can, so that we can use this for the next activity. So again, take 1 or 2 minutes. I'll check in about 2:38, 2:39. So for the sake of time, which we are unfortunately running up against, I will have us move to the next activity, but these slides will be shared with you all afterwards. So if this is something that you feel like is helpful for kind of getting your mind working, creative juices flowing, you can always do it with kind of as many minutes as you'd like. So for the next part of this, now that you've hopefully identified a specific writing task that you're working on or planning to work on, take just probably a minute at this point to respond to one of these 2 prompts, where basically you take that task that you identified and start to list out what you need to do to accomplish that specific task. So 2:40, we'll check in here. Okay, so hopefully you were able to identify some things, break down these tasks or these writing tasks that you have that might be overwhelming into something smaller, more manageable, and you've given yourself some steps as to how to work towards completing those tasks. So with that being said, I will spend some time talking about strategies for how you can actually make time to write and complete these tasks. So I'll try to be a little quick here. Anyways, the first thing is to track your time. A lot of time can be spent by distractions, or we might think that just a few minutes checking Instagram or going on TikTok is just a few minutes, but in reality, that can spiral into a lot of minutes, and it can also kind of take you out of the zone, away from everything that you've been doing. And you might kind of inevitably end up procrastinating using these. So trying to eliminate distractions, eliminate things that in any way can kind of move you away from your writing task, and again, just ultimately distract you or end up taking up a lot more time than you think it would. The next is to identify productive times of day for you when you write so that you can try to coordinate a schedule or a routine that allows you to write during that time. So if you know that you're a morning person and that's when you tend to feel the most awake, the most productive, try to set time to write in the morning. Obviously, don't, structure it. Whereas if you don't get morning writing time, then you're just not going to write at all. But if you can, again, develop a routine for yourself that kind of prioritizes that, that can be really helpful for getting a lot more written and a lot more done. So the next strategy, again, similar to kind of being able to create a routine at all, is just to carve out writing time. As grad students, we have a lot that we're juggling, in both our personal and professional lives. So building writing time into your schedule and not just kind of brushing it off as, oh, when I have free time, or oh, maybe between this time I'll write. You will probably fall into that kind of procrastination or that perfectionism of, if I only have this amount of time to write, or I'm only squeezing it into this amount of time, then I might not be able to, do it. And then you just kind of push it off. So making it a staple part of your day, a staple part of your routine, can help you get into the habit of doing it and make it feel less like a daunting task that you're kind of forced to fit in and work with. Also, chunking your writing. This is a lot like breaking down your writing into smaller tasks and writing into smaller bits. But to chunk your writing, you can kind of focus on individual questions or individual topics or results. So, not thinking about how you're transitioning between paragraphs, not thinking about topic sentences, just identifying, again, kind of a specific thing or topic or research that you're going to be doing or writing to today, and writing as much as you can to that. Also, setting regular goals. So things like telling yourself you're going to try to write for a certain amount of words or a certain number of pages or even for a certain amount of hours. Anything that can help you see this kind of progress that you're making can help increase the motivation that you have and can lead you to success, rather than trying to cram writing into wherever you have free time. And so, last but certainly not least, you can reward yourself for reaching certain goals. No one's going to reward you but you. So whether it's like allowing yourself to have or buy a little treat, or if you're going to go for a walk after having written a certain amount of pages, just doing anything that can kind of help you feel like, okay, I'm acknowledging this, I made this accomplishment, I am taking steps forward, and not just, going on the 24/7 grind. Gives your time brain to rest and recognize how far you've come and what you've done, and allow you to just move forward and feel more motivated to continue writing. So I think for time wise, this would normally be an activity, but we're a little pressed for time right now. So this is maybe something that you can come back to later or just think about. But considering everything that you've kind of written to before, identifying a specific strategy for yourself that will help you build in time in your day or in your week or in your month to be writing regularly. Obviously, we're all different and we all need different things and we all have different routines. So it's the same strategy or the same thing isn't, going to work for everybody. But if you can think about all these things that I've had you write about previously and figure out what is the one thing I can do to help me implement my writing more regularly into my day, into my routine for yourself, that can help it again kind of become more regular and avoid this kind of pressure or like a looming pressure of, oh, maybe I'll write when this thing comes, things like that. So anyway, for time's sake, I will move on, but keep this in the back of your head and reference that writing that you've done throughout the workshop to identify the strategies for yourself that can work. So the last things I'll talk about really quickly are just strategies to maintain focus, because that can be a really difficult thing, especially, with how prominent a lot of distractions can be. So the first thing is just to find a place that offers you a focused environment and being aware of what you need to be focused. So whether that's silence, or a location with limited distractions, or finding a certain type of music that really works for you, or just an environment to feel kind of an energy that you like to be around that helps you be more productive. Identifying that and going out of your way to situate yourself with that is going to be really helpful, obviously. Also, eating and staying hydrated. It seems really simple and really obvious, but a lot of times we forget to do that, or we neglect this aspect of ourselves in our lives in order to kind of focus on other things. Or sometimes we can just be so focused that we forget. But all of this is what helps nourish our brain and give us energy. That is what allows us to write and think effectively and not just keep running in circles. Similar to the first one, just finding what habits work for us. So hopefully you have been thinking about this kind of across the whole workshop, but identifying how you work productively, what works for you, if it works better to write for a long time or in short bursts. Just thinking about these things that kind of help you maintain your focus and help you within your writing process. So also just doing something different. A lot of times we might think that I have to keep grinding to write because I haven't gotten what I needed. But keeping on working at the same thing without giving your brain distraction or time to work on anything else can be too much and can be counterproductive. So if you're feeling stuck, taking a break, walking away, doing something else can be what your brain needs to kind of give you that. Similarly, taking breaks. You're not a robot. So as much as we feel like we have to be productive 100% of the time or 24 hours a day, we do need a break. So taking time away from the screen, away from the pen and paper, walking, getting air, doing something to take our mind off of it allows us to come back refreshed and with a new perspective. And lastly, doing something to release frustration. This can be as simple as like doing something you've been putting off, like doing the dishes or taking the trash out, because the more that we can eliminate things that might be worrying us or bogging us down, the easier it can be to focus on the task in front of us. And then we might not be constantly worrying about, in the back of our mind, oh, I have this to do, but I still need to write my dissertation or do this kind of thing. So anyways, hopefully, again, you can take some time to kind of go back to all of these writing habits and things that you've identified earlier and just think about, again, kind of what works for you, what is reasonable and feasible for you to incorporate into your routine, and just be more mindful of what works for you and what you like so that you can create situations and environments where it's easier for you to write. And so again, you're not kind of pushing it off and we're treating it as something that should be avoided. Anyways, last couple of general things. General writing advice is just to get support from others. So finding supportive people who can encourage you in your writing is obviously really helpful and motivational. Also, just that awareness that no one's first few drafts are good. Just get something down because anything you have written, you can build off of from there. And give yourself credit for doing that. Give yourself credit for putting anything down on the paper that you have. And also remember, like that kind of common phrase, you're not a grade, you're not reduced to the grade, you're also not your writing. So separate yourself from the paper, separate yourself from the writing. Just if you get a bad grade or bad feedback, that's not a reflection on you. You're still learning, you're still growing, and you can still do it. And also just listen and revise. So taking feedback when it's necessary, listening carefully to it, talking with others about it can help you refine your writing and work with it. And also just think about it more objectively, again, not as an extension necessarily of yourself. And also obviously applying feedback where it's useful helps you improve your skill set. So these texts should be on the handout. They're really helpful, just general writing guides and for helping you work through these types of mindsets. And then the last thing here are some specific resources at UNLV. Obviously, your professors, your mentors, people in the field can give you advice. There are workshops like this and other things offered by the libraries and all these different places on campus. Career services, academic advisors are available. Obviously, the Writing Center is here to help with all types of writing, even graduate writing. And there are a bunch of online resources that the handout will link and also that you can just I've talked about throughout the workshop and that you can just kind of find and Google on your own. Anyways, that is all that I have. I'm sorry for going a few minutes over, but I hope that was helpful and I hope it gave you a sense to think a little bit more about your writing process and your writing habits and how you can, work with those to work through writer's block and perfectionism and things like that. So.
Thank you so much, Maddie. Would you mind just mentioning, in case folks don't know, like how to sign up for a writing consultation, what that looks like?
Yes. So we have a website. I think it's unlv.edu/writing-center. Through there, you can schedule appointments online. You can schedule in-person, virtual, or asynchronous ones with us. And we have instructions and details on how to do that. I think also through the Rebel Success Hub, you can do that. So like from your personal portal, you can do that. Or you can like email the Writing Center email or call the Writing Center and schedule an appointment that way. But all of that information is laid out pretty clearly on the website. And there's so much, so I don't want to like overly detail it and confuse, but unlv.edu/writing-center should have all of the information that you need.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I'm gonna stop our recording here. Thank you.
Okay.